And welcome back. George Noory with you. Steve Gonsalves with us. Steve, have you ever, after an event, a haunting, come home and just have to say prayers and things like that?
I do sometimes have to, I'd say, clear my head more than say prayers. I am religious. I am a Catholic, and I do pray at times. But I think a good walk. Sometimes, if we're traveling, I'll walk around the hotel parking lot a couple times, get some air. You do need to take care of yourself and make sure that your head is on straight and that things don't get to you. But I don't pray too much in terms of, after a case. I more do things just to clear my head and get a little more zen, I guess you'd say.
Let's take some calls. Let's start with Elizabeth in Miami, Florida, first-time caller. Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for calling.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I can't believe I really get to talk with George, Noory, and his death. And what a fitting night, George. I just took the phone out, and I said, I will call. And the first ring, I said, wow. And Gina, I heard you talking to Gina, and I said, wow, I'll call her. Please.
You sound upset, Elizabeth. You okay?
I'm going to tell you something. Mentally, physically, spiritually, I am okay, not great. Yes, spiritually, I am great. With the others, I'm okay. Because whatever you call them, entities have been in my house since 2016, and I didn't know. Because I live in a place where other people live in a condominium. And when I go away and come back and see strange things like a socks and things like that, I would run down to one of my neighbors and I said, oh, is this your child's sock? And I didn't know. She would say no. And I said, I wonder if when I went to the laundry, I bring it in with my clothes, drop it on the carpet, didn't see it until you come back. You go away and come back, because I used to go away a lot. Now, I can't even go shopping, because if I go shopping, somebody is in my house. I know who it is. I know who it is. I know she brings a dead acupuncturist in. She's here right now. God knows I'm not crazy, okay? Because after a certain age, you're supposed to be demented, all right? Where I have all my mental scruples with me. But it's only God that is guiding and protecting me. But at the same time, I'm being irritated. Because what? I own a one-bedroom condominium. I am not of the races who live here. It's just, I'm sorry if I'm going to insult, but yes, Miami is a closed door to certain races. And I am inundated with spirits in my home. Take my things right before me. Even my very taxes to the government. I was writing it out in my dining room. I left just to go next door to the kitchen, my kitchen. I came back. It's gone.
Let me ask you this, Elizabeth. Is this entity, has it tried to hurt you?
Well, you know what? I am, because I'm eating, I am losing so much weight. And I can't tell why. My doctor doesn't know why. I eat well. I don't go to McDonald's and those places. I cook my own food from scratch. You cannot completely get away from processed food. But all the food I cook is not processed. Maybe addition. Butter is processed. I make my own meal. I don't know what else to do. All my things are broken and stolen. Even the dead woman's clothes in every corner.
Well, let's bring Steve in for a second. Steve, what does she do to get rid of this entity that's in her condo?
Yeah, it sounds like this is quite frightening for her. One thing that I thought was really interesting is she said that nothing had really happened in her place until 2016. And, I don't think anybody knows what and when I say they, I mean whatever that other side is, whatever that is, the energy, a ghost, they may not be aware of time and space and interpret it that way, but what it tells me is that something may have happened in 2016, and I would wonder, did she maybe acquire an item from, maybe a yard sale or an antique sale or an estate sale, or maybe somebody gave something to her? I feel like there has to be a catalyst there, and if she can recognize what that is, it may help her to be able to remove what is there that is really scaring her.
Is it easy to get rid of an entity?
No, it's not. And, sometimes you may even need to think, should I even get, if you think of eternity as everlasting, you're here for 80 years, maybe if we're lucky, and not 90 years. That person may have an eternity of who knows how, but it's not easy. I think if there is something attached or someone attached to an object or a thing, that would be a good place to start. And even just vocalizing out loud into the environment, you're not welcome here. I'm not comfortable with this. Sometimes that does get some things to calm down. Of course, you can enlist the help of a psychic or somebody in the clergy. But if she's looking for herself to really try to move forward, I would try to recognize what changed in 2016. Was there a renovation? What happened? And try to see if you could connect a person to that event, and that could be the first step in trying to figure out how to stop that phenomena from happening.
How does somebody who lives, let's say, in Miami, Florida, like Elizabeth does, find someone to help cleanse her house of ghosts?
You can really reach out to just about, if she's religious, and it doesn't matter what religion, it could be as simple as calling her local parish, and they'll connect her right away to where she needs to be connected. And a lot of people feel silly doing that, but you won't believe how nice, and how well they'll be treated. They don't need to worry that someone's going to make fun of them or think they're weird. Even if it is a church, they will walk you through the process, even all the way up, believe it or not, to an exorcism if you need that sort of thing. If she's looking the route of a psychic, we are fortunate in to be in the day and age of social media, which should make it quite easy for her to find that sort of help, and even just websites. But to enlist a psychic just from their website, I think could be a little dangerous. You want to have some, thought of who they are and who they've worked with. So she may want to guard herself in that respect. But I think calling her local church or finding a local investigation team in her area would be the first step for her.
And if you sell your place, aren't most states requiring you to disclose if it's haunted?
Yeah, that is becoming more and more a thing. And I know in Massachusetts you do have to say that if you have knowledge of somebody passing away in your home or dying, or that if you do suspect that there is something strange going on, you're supposed to divulge that information. And it's hard to I've heard of cases that have gone to court over that, and I think it's hard to say one way or the other how that ends up turning out with something you can't really prove or disprove. But I know when it comes to a death, that sort of thing, you are supposed to, especially if there's no, easy record keeping of it.
Let's go to Chris in Portland, Oregon, west of the Rockies. Hi, Chris. Welcome to the program.
Hi, George. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure thing.
Now, we've lived in the house I live in since 1972. We came from Chicago. The house directly to the south of us is very strange. It was built in the early 60s, 1960s. And it has been torn down, and a new house has been built in its place about 10 years ago. But it's like a revolving door there. People move in and out, in and out. And the rest of the neighborhood, we just stay in one place until we die, We don't move.
Yeah.
But this house, it's like, because, I'm more spiritual, I notice things that happen over there, and everybody else thinks I'm crazy, but, I say no, it's haunted. I really do think it's haunted. But the majority of couples who live there, they divorce, and if they want to save their marriage, they have to move away. People stay there maybe a few months to maybe a year, or the most they've stayed there is maybe 3 years. The children and the pets are such problems, and it's really bad energy, and it just kind of permeates throughout the neighborhood. What do you think? And I called the county to see who built that house, who was there, and it was like a farm community here in the early 60s, and then all the houses started to be built. And so I think somebody was either killed or something there. Can you pick up? And I protect myself in our house I'm more Tibetan Buddhism, so I do like the Dalai Lama. I do a lot of feng shui, and I'm okay.
What's your gut tell you, Stephen?
Ooh, what makes you think it's haunted? Have the people who have lived and come and gone there?
All the same kind of pattern. And it's very troubling, and it's very disturbing, and all that kind of stuff. Divorce and problems, drug addicts.
When it comes to divorce and problems, it's very interesting you say that, because that does seem to be a bit of a pattern that you do see when it comes to a legitimate haunting. When people are living in a real haunted house and they're dealing with a haunting, it's very hard to maintain relationships. It's very hard to maintain certainly a romantic relationship. It's hard to maintain a career. It just gets very difficult for people. So you do see that turnover where there is a divorce. There is people moving out of the house. If you look, and this may be a silly comparison, but it's quite true. You even just look at the movie Poltergeist, say. In the beginning of the movie, the husband, he's a businessman. He's selling real estate. He's having a great time. He's happy. He's watching the game with his friends. By the end of the movie, he hasn't showered. He hasn't shaved. He hasn't taken his house coat off. Him and his family are at odds with each other. He doesn't have a job anymore. If we go to the very end, his house implodes. So it's not so much that, but it is something that really does wear on people. It's not always, hey, I'm in this haunted house and it's awesome. Sometimes it's very damaging to people. So it does seem likely in that sense. But the people who live there, have you heard them say, I've had this phenomena, I've experienced that, or is it just a sort of a vibe you get?
Kind of like, out in this county, Washington County, it's all about Nike and Intel. This is where these corporates are at. And so lots of the neighbors work there. So the fellow next door is a Nike guy. The wife is a nurse. So I notice whenever I open my door, I'm crippled, but my door squeaks. It's really loud. And she can hear that. And she's right outside as soon as I open my door. But I don't talk to them. I don't. People in this neighborhood are straight-laced. They're not coast-to-coast people. So, that's all I can tell you. They think I'm the troublemaker. And I say, no, there's something down there in the dirt, and it's always going to be there. It's not me.
Wow. I mean, it does seem like, that pattern there with that house. To say if there is something really happening there, I think we'd need a little more information in terms of what it's like for the people who are actually living in there. It's hard to say if, drug use and divorce is the direct cause of some sort of haunting.
What if somebody was buried there, Steve?
If somebody was buried there and there's some unrest, for sure. I would think also on the other side of it, to have that property checked for their electrical, make sure there's no really high, say, EMF or magnetic levels in that house, because there could be some people suffering from EMF hypersensitivity. That's a real phenomena where people will get extreme headaches and they'll be, short-tempered. And we do find that if they have electrical engineers come in and change their wiring and get it appropriate and bring those levels down, that the phenomena does stop and they become a bit more happy with each other. I'd be interested to see if that's it. But without a full scale or even a bit of an investigation, I'm not sure how to deem it haunted or not without being there myself.
Steve, have you ever had to go investigate a haunted cemetery?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Many times investigated in graveyards. I didn't for a long time, and it's not something that my contemporaries are always into. Jason does not like investigating graveyards, and we did see that whenever we did, and stories started that we would see some vandalism in the graveyards and cemeteries. So it gets a little tricky, but I think they're a lot of fun. But you would also have to think, why would something haunt their bones and their sort of body there, especially if you're dealing with religious people, say, who believe in eternity and believe in you as always being and not necessarily conceived right at the moment of birth, but or not, but that would be 80 years in that mortal body, maybe. So in the grand scheme of things, why would you be connected to that if you're looking at millions or eternity of your conscious? I'm not sure that you would. We do find that hauntings might be more associated with where they had these experiences and moments and even places of death more so than where the body remains. But I have had experiences in graveyards, and I know investigators who have, and we've investigated graveyards and got great evidence. So it's definitely a good place to investigate, if you get permission, of course.
Where's the best place to get your book, A Life with Ghosts?
Oh, thank you for asking. Anywhere that they really love to buy books from. Of course, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. Then go to the Simon & Schuster website, and everything will be laid out there for them. Premier Collectibles has an autographed copy that people can get. But mostly it'll be through Barnes & Noble and Books A Million and
Super.
Amazon.
All right, we're going to come back and take final calls with you, Steve, in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. Our final segment with Steve Gonsalves as we take your calls. His book is called The Life with Ghosts. His website is part of his Facebook account. And how many social media outlets are you on, Steve?
Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or I guess X they call it now.
X now, that's right.
Yeah, which is fine. Yeah, I'll call it whatever they want. But usually Instagram, Facebook mostly.
Tell us a little bit before we take final calls about the documentary films you've been part of.
Yeah, The House in Between 1 and 2, it was a really fascinating project, and I had tried, at least I wanted to get science involved quite a bit, and I had a really hard time getting physicists that would talk to me on camera when it had to do with the paranormal, and I thought that was pretty interesting. I would be on the phone with them, and as soon as I mentioned what the topic was, they were very quick to get off the phone. And I actually couldn't find a geophysicist that would work with us at all. Literally, I was hung up on. They're really worried about their grant money and if they would be ridiculed. But I did find one, Carolyn. She's a geophysicist and worked in the second part of the documentary. And she did such fascinating research, put electrodes all throughout the yard. She tried to see what was happening back there and did some really fascinating research. And George, one thing that was awesome, this happened in the second installment, is this geophysicist who does not believe in the paranormal went there to really get to the bottom of things. And she had her own experience that she didn't expect, and it threw her for a loop. And we filmed part 2 maybe 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and she got so attached to the research in the house that she goes back now on her own, just by herself, to continue some of the research there that she was doing. And it really, really changed her mind and her whole outlook. And we had to not beg her, but we had to really, let her know how important it was to the documentary and to the field of paranormal research that we tell that story, because she was afraid that the scientific community was going to, laugh her out of her own field. But luckily that didn't happen. Really, really cool stuff.
Off we go to final calls. Michael in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Hey, Michael, go ahead, sir.
Hey, how are you, George? Thank you very much for taking my call. I really appreciate it. It's a fascinating program you two are talking about this evening.
Thank you.
I'd like to know if you've ever heard of an area in Connecticut called Dudleytown.
Ooh, I'll jump in with this one. Dudleytown, I have. I've been to Dudleytown many times. Before it was, breaking and entering. Now I think it still might be. There's that dark entry society that was sort of barring people from going in there for quite some time. But there was a radio program in Connecticut. Dee Snider, the singer of Twisted Sister and some other popular things, had a radio show, and I was his paranormal guy. And we went to Dudleytown together and did a bit of it. It was really cool.
I was very good friends with Meatloaf. And if you want to cry, just watch his last concert in Germany. That will bring tears to anyone's eyes.
Good point, Michael. What was so unusual about Dudleytown, Steve?
Dudleytown, come to find out, it likely all stemmed from some bad crops and that sort of thing. But they do, the lore is that the town was poisoned, but or cursed rather. But come to find out, it likely was just a poison and not a curse. But a lot of people passed there and just abandoned the town. The rest got out of there, and you do see a lot of foundations and I did have some experiences there, not a lot of the ones people thought, but there was a time when we were hearing dogs running around us, circling us, which it seemed to be they would be just a foot or two in front of us. And I don't know what sort of haunting that would be, but we did also see what appeared to be some red, I don't want to use the term orbs because they weren't orbs like we think of them in the paranormal field, but they were ominous lights that seemed to morph into each other and into themselves, which was really fascinating to see in the distance. And we did actually get it on the infrared camera, which was awesome. But other than that, I didn't see any of the apparitions they claim to be happening out there. I wasn't pushed like they claim happens or any of that stuff. But, it's a very horror movie in the sense that I remember being lost and asking, hey, do you know where Dudleytown is? And they really look at you and tell you don't want anything to do with Dudleytown. And then it's, an hour, 45 minutes to an hour hike through the woods to get there. You're going to know where you're going.
Jeez. Let's go to Ruth in Maryland. Hello, Ruthie. Go ahead.
Hi, George, and hi, Steve. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Steve, you like history, so you've probably been to Point Lookout prison camp in southern Maryland here. And about a week ago, I was about 10 miles from there, and I was trying to do my first EVP, is that what it's called, at a cemetery. You were talking about cemeteries a little while ago. And anyway, I'm Catholic also, so I prayed before I did the taping. And now this cemetery, I told somebody this before, it's right next to the military base, part of the military base that's an airfield, Webster Airfield. And there's a lot of satellites, and they do drone testing, and the Coast Guard is also there. Now, I did pick up some Morse code in my tape, in the recording, and my question is, have you ever picked up Morse code before doing an EVP, and do you think that that base will interfere electronically with my recording? Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. That's a great question. I have never recorded Morse code, and you're certain that it's, I don't know if she's still on the line, but...
Yeah, she's still with us.
Okay, are you certain it is Morse code and not just... Because I know that digital airway can interact and it makes like a clicking sound in your recordings, but it is the cadence of Morse code, certainly.
It kind of sounds like it, but see, the Coast Guard, I think they still use Morse code and all, so that's why I'm wondering if, like, it could be just that I'm picking up on some of theirs, you know what I mean? I'm wondering if their stuff is going to interfere with the taping. If big satellites and, you know, they test drones, and do you think that'll interfere?
I think it could certainly interfere. What I would do is maybe bring that recording to the you know, where you did record it. Maybe talk to somebody in the naval yard there who may be able to confirm if it is Morse code or not. Or maybe you'd be able to match up the pattern yourself to see if it is. Because if it is, that would be really, really super cool, quite honestly.
Let's go next to Chris in Milton, New Hampshire. Hey, Chris, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, couple of ghost stories for you, Steve. The first one is about a little boy that his grandfather had made a sailboat for. So he used to keep it in this cupboard, you know, in the corner of the kitchen, so the boy wouldn't find it or know about it until he got ready.
Yeah.
And the door kept opening. So after the grandfather died before he got to give it to the boy, that's what happened.
He got anyway, it to the kid, huh?
The second one about my grandmother and grandfather. They moved into this house, and so the first few days they were there, my grandmother kept waking up in the middle of the night and hearing this dragging noise upstairs. So she would wake my grandfather up, and he would say, "Oh, just ignore it. It's just some squirrels up there," or something like that. And then after they moved out, she found out that there was a murder committed up there.
Oh, goodness.
And the guy dragged the body across the floor and stuffed it in a closet. So,
this is all in the same house?
I lost you there.
Is this all happening in the same house?
This was a different house. Two different houses there. But, yeah, so they moved out of there eventually, but she told me about that, and it's like, oh, boy.
New England seems to be haunted quite a bit, doesn't it, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anywhere you have a little more history and, being some of the earlier settled parts of the country, maybe that adds to it. Certainly a little more traumatic history in some regard, and all of that plays to it. Fascinating story, that last gentleman, that first one there, with it seems like a haunting of more of the devotion and love there, not really wanting to leave, his grandson behind. That's really sweet to hear.
Yeah, it's about Joe in Monterey, California. Hey, Joe, let's get you in here.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call, George.
Sure thing, Joe.
I'll try to be quick because you're running out of time. People could be haunted, by the way, from past lives. They might have done something, and they might have angered people, and after, let's say, 1 or 2 lifetimes, they may catch up to the person and come after them. And they might have a few people. Instead of 1 or 2 or 3, they might have a half a dozen or more. So that does happen. But I'm talking about something that you may run into, hopefully not. And sometimes it happens in vortexes. But there's something called possession, but it is a type of possession, of extraterrestrial possession. A friend of mine was thrown around the house. Just like the movie The Entity, she was physically thrown around the house. And she's very powerful as a spiritual warrior. But there are things that we cannot stop, no matter who we call on. And we could call on the armies of God. But these beings, these entities, are something that they have technology.
Have you had objects flown across the rooms and stuff like that, Steve?
I have seen objects move, yeah. It is quite startling, quite honestly. And you do have to wonder what it is, and what's happening. And it's not always, people think, oh, maybe it's impossible. But if you look at some of the science side of it, if you can get a room up to 10,000 milligauss, that the possibility to levitate metal objects and things are possible and does happen in laboratories and in medical facilities. So is there ways that things can move around and levitate and still work in the laws of science? Yeah, and it's really, really quite something. But to have things fly around a room reminds me, honestly, back to Poltergeist, and it's quite fascinating when she says, and she's so excited, they're explaining to him how we caught this truck move 7 inches over the course of like 5 hours. And he just looks at her and says, oh, yeah? Opens the door and everything's flying around. And
yeah.
It doesn't quite happen like that I've seen. But there has been, in the early days, we investigated a case that furniture was sliding around the room. And there was a couch that actually slid a bit. And we had a case where a door, as an early TAPS case, the team, of course, behind Ghost Hunters, a door slammed and took off the homeowner's fingertips. And that's quite an intense phenomenon. And you got to think, like, geez. And people can be hurt. It is quite scary, but it's usually that type of thing. It's more an offshoot, because he talked about possession and it being quite scary there. The scary stuff seems to be more just a byproduct. The door slams and takes off your fingertip. Who knows if the ghost said, oh, there are his fingers, I'm going to take them off with this door, or if it just happened.
Well, just keep doing what you're doing, Steve, and stay safe. The name of the book, A Life with Ghosts. For Dan Galante, Gina Salvati, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burrows, Tim Banal, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett.